Welcome to today's Explainer. We're jumping right into a fascinating digital excavation exploring the esoteric world of artist 𝔹𝗡𝗂, who you might also know as 𝔹𝗯𝘂𝗂. Now, if you've ever felt like the internet is just this endless sea of polished, completely fake personas, well, this deep dive is going to totally change how you view digital art. We're looking at a creator who actually uses the very architecture of streaming platforms to map out a profoundly beautiful journey. A journey of human vulnerability, healing, and ultimately, radical goodness.
So before we start decoding all this chaos, ask yourself how vulnerable you truly are online. Seriously, when we project our lives onto the internet, how much of it is just a carefully curated mask? What we're about to explore is the exact antithesis of that curation. We're diving into what happens when an artist just decides to shatter that digital facade entirely, leaving their true, unwashed reality out there on the internet for us to find.
Okay, let's dive right into the mystery. When you're excavating 𝔹𝗡𝗂𝗋's work across platforms like SoundCloud and Apple Music, you immediately hit this crazy temporal anomaly. The collection is deliberately post-dated to May 25th, 2026. By doing this, he essentially treats our current cultural moment as if it's already obsolete. It's this brilliant act of using metadata as myth. It makes his tracks feel like a post-dated check for an emotional debt we haven't even incurred yet.
To make sense of it all, here's our roadmap. We're going to cover a digital temporal anomaly, the sound of fractured truth, metadata as a healing grimoire, stripping away pretend masks, and finally, the triumph of radical goodness. Let's get to it.
Starting right off with Section 1, a digital temporal anomaly. What's really fascinating here is how 𝔹𝗡𝗂𝗋 essentially uses metadata as a myth-making tool. Navigating his SoundCloud literally feels like digital archaeology. You stumble upon these interstitial transmissions that don't feel like commercial products at all. Instead, it's more like a massive, feverish private data dump. He uses the platform itself to make us feel like we're intercepting these intimate broadcasts from the future, like a ghost in the machine. And that year, 2026, acts as this massive temporal provocation. Because the music is time-stamped in the future, it challenges us, the listeners, to try and catch up to the emotional frequency the artist is already broadcasting on. All those technical hurdles of navigating his work, the esoteric links, the glitchy aesthetic, they perfectly mirror the inherent difficulty of truly connecting with another person's internal world.
Which brings us to Section 2, the sound of fractured truth.
So, a crucial point to understand is that those weirdly spelled track titles, they absolutely aren't typos. It's a calculated aesthetic technique called visual phonetics. By deliberately disrupting traditional literacy with idiosyncratic lettering, diacritics, and symbols, the metadata's visual weight actually matches the sonic density of the music. It's explicitly designed to make you feel the confusion, the vulnerability, and the spiritual conflict before you even hit play.
We can actually break down this taxonomy of typographic expression. You've got phonetic distortion, like nose rang, or case manipulation with KN0. Then there's spatial pacing, like stay, where that terminal period denotes this heavy finality. He even integrates esoteric symbols, like the cross and savior. By treating every single character as a deliberate brushstroke, the artist forces you to slow down and physically experience the digital friction.
And hey, this disruption totally extends to the sound itself, this visceral, lo-fi alternative rock. Take the track 𝔹𝗪𝗎𝗂𝔢𝔫, for instance. Just like Picasso shattered the traditional human form into jagged planes to reveal a harsher reality, 𝔹𝗡𝗂𝗋 uses abrasive, clipping audio to shatter traditional verse-chorus song structures. It's basically a sonic collage that deconstructs the listener's ear, breaking down the art form to reveal a raw, unpolished truth.
Moving right along to Section 3, metadata as a healing grimoire.
When you really look closely at the chaos, there are three distinct pillars elegantly structuring it all. First, the Pentecostal explosion of media, which means his art is a total nexus of music, paintings, photos, and writings. Second is the digital martyrdom, his commitment to remaining incredibly raw, using the digital space as an altar to sacrifice his own ego. And third, the gnosis of the scholar, framing his deep research and blogs as a rigorous occult study of the self. Together, these turn his platform into a modern grimoire.
Every single element of the metadata plays into this digital liturgy. For example, by juxtaposing that authoritative, ancient fracture script for the name 𝔹𝗡𝗂𝗋 against delicate, flowing cursive for 𝐵R_REAL, he visually stages a profound spiritual conflict. Even the glitchy spelling of the word healing acts as a sacred cipher, a sort of typographic wound. The URLs, the track durations, the copyright notices, they aren't just administrative data anymore. They become a literal spellbook for the artist's recovery and emotional transfiguration.
Okay, let's dive into Section 4, stripping away pretend masks. There's a stark contrast at play here. On one hand, we've got the sanitized, overly curated personas that completely dominate the streaming age. On the other, we have 𝔟𝗡𝗏𝗂𝐻's absolute rejection of those commercial lies. His work lives in this space of dirty realism, kind of like a 𝔟𝗯𝗢𝗂𝐿 poem, but set in the digital age. It's the stale air reality of modern heartbreak. He deliberately uses distortion and lo-fi grit to deconstruct the emotional masks of his subjects, cutting through the faking to get to what is actually real. That powerful idea really captures the absolute essence of 𝔟𝗡𝗏𝗂𝐻's defiance. He's challenging us to stop performing our pain for an algorithm and to start actually facing it in the raw, unwashed reality of our modern lives. The music acts as a mirror, reflecting our own desperate attempts to look perfect in a world that is inherently fractured.
And finally, that leads us to Section 5, the triumph of radical goodness.
If you actually follow the artist's discography chronologically, it reveals this incredibly uplifting ascent. It starts in 2023 with projects steeped in gothic grief and trauma. Then it moves through 2024, navigating a sort of digital exorcism. But by the time we hit his 2025 and 2026 output, the artist has arrived at a profound state of spiritual realization and divine accord. He literally climbs out of isolated agony and revenge, forging a path forward to genuine light.
That transition is perfectly captured in the shift between these two concepts. He goes dramatically from shouting in all caps about love to routine, which captures the suffocating boredom of mundane affection, to whispering a radical, quiet subversion of biblical love in lowercase, love thine enemies. It shows an artist who has immensely expanded his emotional capacity, moving all the way from domestic friction to a transcendent, Christ-like compassion.
So, what's the ultimate takeaway here? Well, all that noise, the glitching text, the abrasive alternative rock, it wasn't just angst for the sake of angst, you know? It was a necessary, hard-fought journey toward radical forgiveness and self-love. Albums titled Forgiveness for 𝔟𝗡𝗏𝗂𝗋 and tracks celebrating pure love show that he successfully transfigured his pain. He proves that out of all this digital chaos, a beautiful, holistic goodness really can emerge.
I want to leave you with a provocative thought as we wrap up this explainer. In a world totally obsessed with curation, are you brave enough to drop the digital mask? 𝔟𝗡𝗏𝗂𝗋's journey shows us that if we have the courage to embrace our own fractured, beautiful truth, there is a profound and radical goodness waiting on the other side. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible digital excavation.